Ah, yes, greetings and all of that. Been a fun few days around here. Oh, and thank you to Andrew and his wife Rachel for sharing out the last video. Much obliged. I like the Wilsons, they're good people. Now, for the new people around here, let it be known I am a very gentlemanly sort of bloke, so let me reiterate some advice. If you come into my comment section with a disagreement and you're polite about it, manners go a very long way. I'm like Hannibal Lecter, discourtesy is unspeakably ugly to me. However, with that being said, do not showcase a sense of snark and only the intelligence to prove you're nothing more than a mid-witted asshole at best. You run a very high risk of making a spectacle of yourself, and should you be stupid enough to try and tangle with me and I find your answers lackluster and unsatisfactory, be very aware I'm the one with the platform, and I have no issue whatsoever with turning your ass into an entertaining teaching tool. Case in point, this Destiny fanboy over here. Now, given that this is not my first rodeo, and it won't be the last, I know how the fanboys work. They're like all the other scripts. They're not here to listen, they're not here to learn. Frankly, I don't think they can. They basically look at whatever prominent content creator can best flex their worldview, and then latch onto them like they're some kind of faux messiah. As you can see if you care to pause here and read this individual is very regime-brained, very blue-pilled. As a consequence, I'm going to be rather condescending in a satirical manner because the audience finds it funny. It's hilarious because you would never have a conversation with Destiny. Oh dear God, how will I go on living now? Video essayists confusing their unchallenged propaganda soapbox with intelligence is the gift that keeps on giving. Mate, I'm a monarchist in the 21st century West with a largely American audience. Unchallenged. I'll better get more pushback for my worldview than Destiny gets for his. Now, as you can tell from this, no substance. That's a cheap shot. The discourse is snarky and rude, so my reply is not exactly laden with honey, so I ask him whether or not he agrees with Destiny's tweet. Now, just a reminder, this was Destiny's tweet. Anyone who is supporting Trump at this point has less in common with core American values than any immigrant they warned you about over the past 10 years. When 7076 happened, it was to get away from exactly what Trump represents, someone who thinks they exist above the law. So he replies, yes, I agree with the tweet. My condolences about the head trauma, by the way. Core American values could be democracy, checks and balances, and moral decency for a start. Good Lord, the arsenal we have over here. I'm an amosexual that just walked in on a nuclear stockpile. Keep in mind, Destiny's tweet implies foreigners of the last 10 years have more in common with the so-called core American values than Trump supporters. Seeing as Destiny failed to give a definition of what exactly these values actually are, I simply asked, how would these immigrants attain these core American values? Are the American values tied to the land? Are they tied to the people? Because if it's something any foreigner just has innately, they wouldn't be core American values. They would be universal and thus render his statement redundant and ever so slightly foolish. How would immigrants, most of whom probably don't have the capacity to vote, well, at least not according to standard protocol anyway, within that time scale, have a better grasp of core American values than the voting population of America, most of whom were born on American soil? I still haven't gotten an answer to that question, by the way. But let's start with democracy. Ah, yes, democracy, my favorite subject to bash because it sucks ass. If you could be so kind as to explain how Trump supporters don't value democracy, we're all ears here, kid. Because as far as I can tell, they overwhelmingly favor the democratic process, hence why they're in favor of voting ID, for example. The people the Dems are pouring in, not so much, which would also lead me to conclude their value for the democratic process only goes so far as what they can get out of it, which I would argue negates their capacity to have moral decency. Secondly, democracy tells me nothing. Merely their representatives can be elected, a procedure that is in no way indicative of how the representatives will rule. It doesn't mean they will do their jobs well. Hell, it doesn't even mean they will do it at all. And what happens if the politicians are assholes and their constituents are idiots? Should they disobey the will of the majority if they advocate for objectively stupid things? And how will the people react? Would this bestow upon them redeeming qualities and make them noble statesmen or bad politicians? And is this necessarily a bad thing? Do stop me if this is confusing you. I will bet my bollocks you've never thought this deeply about politics in your entire life, kid. We can cross democracy off our list then. Next up, checks and balances. You gotta be kidding me. Trump supporters borderline worship the US Constitution. Is right up there as a favorite piece of history next to the Bible. and moral decency. Trump's talking about illegals. They would be criminals, so they can't be morally decent people when being in the United States itself is a criminal offense. And also, if moral decency is a core American value, then my good God, California is so un-American it should secede from the bloody Union. At the very least, all of San Francisco needs to be arrested, and maybe tried for treason because, my word. All joking aside though, if moral decency is a core American value, what moral indecency do Trump supporters flex exactly? Was America lacking decency under Trump? If you believe so, do you have any example of this? I have a lot of questions, as you can tell. You seem to not know what a value is and think it has something to do with their ability to vote for some reason. No, I asked, where does core American values come from, and how would the foreigners have more alignment with core American values than Americans who've been in the nation long enough to attain the capacity to vote, because Destiny's statement refers to voting for Trump. It's a question of timescale, and by what methodology would they attain the values, which in your worldview is apparently democracy, checks and balances, and moral decency. I don't believe these are tied at the hip either, by the way. A value is a belief that you live by with some level of conviction. Okay, now how would a foreigner manifest these two values? Do tell. By that measure, Trump trying to overturn an election because he didn't like the outcome, his blatant fascist tendencies and repugnant moral character are not aligned with core American values. Okay, the Democrats have contested every election since Bush in 2000. There's actual compilations of this. Blatant fascist tendencies, the viewers of this video now rolling their glazed eyes thinking you're an idiot. Yes, like his desire to axe the size of government, reinforce borders and allow free speech and guns. Very fascismus. Meanwhile, his opposition has weaponized the Justice Department against him, and no one who buys this crap can ever tell us what he's guilty of for some strange reason. Repugnant moral character. As the guy lopping as president openly boasted about getting a so-called corrupt prosecutor fired who just so happened to be investigating corruption of an energy company whose board his son was sitting on, and I'm sure it's totally a coincidence no evidence of corruption was found shortly after Shokin was fired, and his son having no qualification to be there and openly admitted if it wasn't for the Biden family name, he wouldn't be, who also spent thousands of dollars on hookers and blow and has a crack addiction, banged his brother's widow, and also fathered a child with a stripper, and who the rest of the family desperately want to pretend doesn't exist. But sure, Trump is the one with the repugnant moral character. Say what you like about Trump fornicating with someone employed in adult entertainment, at least he didn't produce offspring from it. Also, you bring up Destiny trying to call people racist, which you just completely made up. Not really. Read it again. Anyone who is supporting Trump at this point has less in common with core American values than any immigrant they warned you about over the past 10 years. Face value to me implies supporting Trump makes you un-American because doing so defiles core American values that for some reason non-Trump supporters have, even though we have no idea what they are. Do tell, why are foreigners even mentioned in the statement at all? And again, how do they attain core American values? You do realize you tried to make this statement work using your interpretation of core American values, and there's not a single person with a functioning pair of eyes who will disagree with my assessment that your pitch for Trump supporters lacking them makes any coherent sense. He's not a bleeding heart soy boy, you just have to paint him that way to try and score a point with your audience. I'm just going to let the audience laugh here because really that may as well be a punchline to a joke. On the second part, you failed to understand his very basic analogy about 1776 and Trump. No, I understood it perfectly fine. Destiny's take is just a pile of complete arse. When 1776 happened, it was to get away from exactly what Trump represents, someone who thinks they exist above the law. This is not an adequate comparison because you're talking about a group of people who were subject to laws they thought were supposedly unjust, hence the desire for the rebellion. The king can't be above the law. He is the law, you fucking idiot. Revolutionary War. The people want to get away from a supposedly tyrannical king. Trump is the unjustly offended party who wishes to usher people away from the actually tyrannical bureaucracy. The implication is that Trump wants the power of a monarch, not that he's been equated to a founding father. No, I'm the one who equated him to the reincarnation of a founding father because my interpretation makes far more sense. I do not consider the power of monarchy bad, nor do I believe in the stupidity of checks and balances that clearly doesn't work. With a never-satiated desire to bloat and an army of unaccountable bureaucrats, and the mindset of morons who think the power of the one is tyrannical, but for some reason the power of a state infinitely larger with far more tentacles to be tyrannical can never be so long as that power remains locked in some mythical zone of equilibrium you call checked and balanced, and across the legions of actors inside the state, many of whom are never interfaced with through the democratic process. You're either bad faith or you just use flowery language and a posh accent to cover up the fact that you're just not that smart. Article 1 of the Constitution is promotion of democracy. Show me where in Article 1 of the Constitution democracy is even mentioned. Bro doesn't know how to Google or read, apparently. Alright. Control F. Democracy. Oh, what do you know? It's not mentioned. What were you saying about not being that smart?
What a twat he was.
I do concur, Mr. Evans. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.